Welcome to the Biztape, your all things music, business, and media podcast. I'm your host, Colin McKay, with my host, Joseph Wazaleski, coast to coast, as always, coming live from the Honda as well.
Live from, the Toyota Avalon.
Oh,
Thank you very much. All right. Not hating on Hondas, but...
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, that was some Honda hate.
Yeah.
I mean,
the silence was really palpable.
Joe... On Honda days, anyway.
Hondica?
The point is that...
Hondica?
Okay, we got to stop. First, before we started the show, I wanted to give a shout out. Weird thing I never thought I would have to say in my life. I'm not for abusing alcohol.
Oh, no.
I just wanted to throw that out there. If you guys follow us on our Biztape, pretty much everywhere, we talked about Gen Z yesterday, who is now as old as I look. I know I look old and I'm fat, which is not a good two things together. But the point is that I'm both of those things, and I am 26, so I am in Gen Z, and I'm here to tell you, like we did last week, Gen Z ain't drinking that much. If you're interested in that story, and we did a TikTok about it, and people are like, "What? Do they think that drinking is good?" And I'm like, surprise! When Joe was making jokes about avocado toast, we were also joking that drinking is bad. By the way, I want to welcome Bud Light, our newest sponsor on the show.
Yeah, let's welcome Mr. Bud. Mr. Bud, how are you today?
Bud. Oh, man.
His mic's turned off.
Mr. Bud. Dude, can you imagine if, okay, so we went to, side note before we start our actual music business news, but I went to Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana this weekend.
Santa Claus, Indiana. Tell us about
Santa Claus,
that
Indiana.
town.
So that is themed after, you're going to guess it, Christmas. And
Hanukkah.
Basically, Hanukkah. Santa Claus, Indiana is Christmas themed. They just picked the name from what I was reading. And they have a theme park there called Holiday World, and we went there. And the reason why I thought the Bud Light thing was funny, which I think would be really funny, is that they have all these holiday characters in Holiday World. And they're all themed after different holidays, right? And we thought, I don't know why we thought this was so funny. Obviously, Santa is the mascot of Santa, Christmas World, right? And then there's Safari Sam, who is the mascot of the water park. Okay, fine. And then there's Kitty Claus, which is the cat that is the mascot of Halloween. All right, cool. You're sensing a theme here, alliteration, whatever. And then there's 4th of July World, aka Independence Day World, and for us Americans here, and it's just George the Eagle, which I thought was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. They were like, all right, somebody in the board meeting was like, I'll give you 2 alliterations with Kitten Claus and Safari Sam, but you can't mess with George the Eagle. He's too patriotic, right? So he's straight,
George,
right?
Yeah,
he's just
George the Eagle is a nationalist for sure.
They're going to be you come up to him, you're like, Eddie the Eagle? And you go, actually, it's George. And then he shakes your hand, and you're like, that was kind of weird. Anyway, the point is that's what I imagine Bud for Bud Light would be. It would be Bud Light. Sorry, all these mascots. Anyway, yes, I'm not for underage drinking, and I'm sorry to tell you people, 26-year-olds are Gen Z. That is right on the cusp.
You're getting old, Gen Z. You're about not to be cool anymore.
Here's the funniest thing about the whole thing, too. They go, well, most of Gen Z can't even drink. And honestly, if you want me to stop dissing on Gen Z, then I can diss on the other generation, which is that's how crazy the other generations drank.
Yeah.
Is that we only have 5 years of legal drinking, and they're like, this is bad. Anyway, let's go to our first story after that recap of me disavowing drinking, which I was like, I don't drink that much anyway, so it's really funny to me. So let's go to our first story. Joe, I was going to start with me if you're all right with that, with this little wacky story. Other than being apparently the conspiracy man on the show with overall giant conspiracies on the music business is going, right? I am also becoming AI man. But I thought this story was...
It's like Mega Man. But
yeah, one of the bosses.
You don't have a
AI
face.
Man. Right. I'm looking for an investment cycle. But like, anyway, AI man, me, is going to talk about another AI topic this week. So buckle up for that. But this is interesting because we talked about Grimes last week and more of like the business model and how the business model is intriguing, right? But I did admit, I was like, Grimes is not the biggest household name. But you know who is? Paul McCartney. So let's talk about this. This caught my eye last week too. I just didn't have time to talk about it, is that AI is going to be used to create the new and final Beatles song, right? The final AI Beatles song is coming to a, streaming near you, which
I thought you were going to say final Dark Souls boss.
The final Dark Souls boss, Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney, is coming to
Oasis,
a game store near you. Anyway, point is that the Beatles have a new recording that's going to come out, and Paul basically announced it just the other day, and he says he's going to use AI to create one final Beatles song, and it involves John Lennon, which is why they need to use the AI for it. So basically,
or they could find him because he's alive, right?
That took me. Yeah. Okay. All right. And Paul is dead. Anyway, the point is that McCartney said, "Hey, I'm going to put one more Beatles song out there." Ringo has made no statements, by the way. I guess I should get that out of there.
So they're going to have to AI Ringo too.
Yeah. Right.
Because he just doesn't want to do it.
No, that would be great. Anyway, Paul hasn't named what it is, but a lot of astute fans have basically called out what they think the song's going to be and why they're AIing it. And it kind of makes a lot of sense. If you're kind of a Beatles buff like me, or an annoying teenager like I was, who just looked up a bunch of stuff about the Beatles stuff. In 1978, Lennon made this song that was called Now and Then. And that was like a demo song, and it's like him playing the piano. I remember listening to it years ago. I actually listened to it before the show, and I was like, wow, blast from the past. But that song was like on a bunch of cassettes that were labeled for Paul. And Lennon like kind of was speculated that he wanted to get back with Paul and kind of reunite the Beatles before his death eventually happened. So like they were on the way, apparently, is what it's always been rumored, to have a Beatles reunion. And then, most people do know this, but I guess Gen Z 26-year-olds, sorry. If you don't know, John Lennon was shot in 1980. I don't know why that was so funny to say. But,
that's so bad. I'm just going to clip that. That's going to be the clip for TikTok.
Just out of context. Just John Lennon was shot in 1980, and then it's just me laughing.
Laughter. That's so bad.
Oh
God, this is the most unhinged episode we've had in a minute.
Wait till we get to your story. Anyway, basically, John Lennon was shot dead in 1980, and so he never got to do this reunion song with Paul. And then apparently Yoko Ono gave McCartney these like tapes and was like, "Hey, these were kind of for you." All right. Important to note, like the song is in like really bad quality. Like It's recorded on a boom box that apparently like sat on John Lennon's piano in his New York apartment. And it's got like, you can find the recording if you're interested in it. Look it up on YouTube. But again, it's Now and Then. And it's got like a lot of noise in it, and like specifically electrical noise, which if you've ever done anything with audio, just sucks to get out, especially if it's not like rhythmic. If it's not like a 60 cycle hum, it's like the worst to get out of. It's just random noise. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's kind of what they want to do with the AI, is use this to restore this recording and use that. And Paul, I think, is going to complete the song. He basically got the idea because this Peter Jackson documentary that a lot of people have obviously heard about, which is Get Back, which is 8 hours long, actually used a bunch of AI, which got Paul's interest in AI technology. Apparently, quote, for the documentary, dialogue editor Emile de la Rey used custom-made AI to recognize the Beatles' voices and separate them from the background noise.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool because, like, I mean, for my post-production people out there, I mean, I know about Isotope and how to use Isotope a good bit, but it's like, it's still got its problems, which is a plugin for non-audio people. And it's not AI, but like, yeah, that's a really cool thing, is that this AI not only just like, filtered out everything that wasn't human dialogue. It like knew which Beatle was each one. So they're going to use this technology to hopefully restore the song and like clear out all that noise I'm talking about, and maybe even re-record the piano. Who knows? But they've already used some of it. I actually was privy to see Paul McCartney in the last year or so, and one of the things he's been doing on tour is he does this thing where he does like a isolated vocal with John Lennon of like I Got a Feeling, and they like play the video in the background and John Lennon singing the song, and Paul like does the duet with him on that song while the band plays. And one of the things that I really noted on there, because let's be honest, if you don't know the history of recording, a lot of stuff is like condensed because of the track limitations, right? If you've heard 4-track, 8-track, that's literally how many tracks they had, right? So guess what? All of it got combined together. It'd be like guitars and vocals and drums and piano, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So it's really hard to isolate that stuff. So it's cool because I got to see that and what it sounds like. And you can actually look that up too. I Got a Feeling, Paul McCartney, I guess 2022, 2023. And you could see how clean John Lennon's vocal has been like ripped out of there from clearly something that's just caught in the middle of a mix. You know what I mean? And there's been this technology for a while, but like there's been issues with like making it clean and a lot of artifacting and just kind of dealing with those artifacts. But it seems that this AI is getting smart enough that it can train on different sounds, which is really cool to have, especially for like archival reasons, right? As well as like, you know, you could do stuff like another use they use this AI for is they used it for surround mixes of Revolver. And so they could isolate instruments and stuff like that. So like I said, they do the thing where it'd be like 4-track, 8-track, and a lot of this stuff came out on like mono, which means one channel of audio, right? Which means all the instruments are all together. And then they did stereo remasters, which means 2-channel, like a left and a right, right? And that a lot of the time that was just pretty lazy half the time in the 60s and 70s, because they're like, we're just stuck with mono. We basically have to turn this, go-kart into a car, basically. And they tried their best. But now we have AI technology that's like, hey, we can strip all this stuff out, actually, which is pretty cool, to be honest.
Yeah.
One of the, like, going back to the song specifically, the song is actually, like I said, if you're a nerd like me or an annoying teenager, which seems to be a very cross-pollinated genre. Basically, this song has been on the radar of many fans for years, especially Beatles fans, because, like, you know, that history I told you about where they were like, this was for Paul from John, and they were going to do it, and then John's life was tragically cut short, you know. But also, the Beatles were supposed to kind of have a recording session for it in 1995, which is the last time they released new material. Which is pretty interesting. And then they didn't do it, supposedly, because George Harrison thought the song was, quote, fucking rubbish, which is the most English thing I've ever heard in my life. So he didn't want to do it.
Was that AI Paul or John?
No, yeah, right. No, Paul would be like, fucking rubbish.
Oh, there we go. There he is.
Anyway, the point is that like he didn't want to do it. An important caveat, like I said, is I think Paul is going to probably finish the rest of the song, literally becoming probably one of the last McCartney-Lennon, or Lennon-McCartney published tracks ever to be created. And he's going to do it because obviously you have the AI aspect of it, right? But also this song only has a chorus right now. So it kind of is like songwriting, right? Like old McCartney-Lennon songwriting where it's like he made the chorus and he's going to make the verses, right? Anyway, like I'll put this in here, but like McCartney kind of goes on a bit about like what it was really like inspiring to him as an artist to deal with, which is that, like he said, Peter Jackson, quote, was able to extract John's vocals from a ropey little bit of cassette. We had John's voice and a piano, and he could separate them with AI. Basically, he said, quote, that's the voice, this is the guitar, lose the guitar. So when we came to what would be making the last Beatles record, it was a demo that John had made when we were able to take John's voice, get it pure through this AI, and then we can mix the record as you normally would, so it gives you sort of leeway, which is honestly, like, as much as I crap on AI, it's the cool part of AI, right? Is the ability to have this, you know, non-human aspect that could have the precision to cut out specific audio samples or bits.
Yeah.
Right? That is insane. So the technology is cool anyway. And I think it is, and I can talk a little bit more about that, but Let's get into kind of the ethics of this, Joe. I was a little bit curious about this. How do you feel about the idea of like John Lennon being like, almost resurrected, right, with this AI? If that makes sense. Like the idea of being like, oh, okay, let's rip his vocals out. It is him. It is singing, right? It feels like he maybe intended the song for Paul, right? But do we get a bad taste in our mouth from being like, well, they don't get a decision in this because they're dead?
I personally don't, because first off, I think people forget that there are dead artists that labels and teams and families of the artists have put out like songs and records and whole catalogs of material that they had banked up that they never would think would see the light of day. And like the consent aspect of that is still heavily debated for sure. Like, for example, Prince, right? Having
and the back catalog.
Yeah, Prince has literally a whole vault of like, I think someone like went through, like there's like a person who's like a keeper of the Prince vault, and like they went through sure and it's like it's like 100,000 plus songs. Right? It's like something insane.
100,000 is an insane number. But I'm pretty sure.
Is it 10,000?
I think it's somewhere like that. It's like at least like it's in the thousands of songs. I know that because the thing with Prince is that like
it's enough
he had
to
the studio in his basement.
It's enough to fill a room of like material and records and stuff like that. And I think like I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong here, Colin, but didn't he record on tape as well? Like a lot of his recordings. So they were like very physical.
Yeah, and so that's be interesting, right? Like in the same way, a lot of them are on tape and probably thankfully Prince was a little bit more advanced in technology than a cassette that John Lennon put on a boombox, right?
Yeah.
But like, a lot of them are required to be archivally like recovered.
For sure. And
sense.
Like Prince is definitely in a different position of like his whole thing was he loved produced out demos. Whereas I think, John didn't care if John would be the type of guy to throw down his iPhone and like, this is an iPhone commercial now, throw down his iPhone and hit that voice memo, and just like let it ride pretty much. But I think like,
I could see that.
I personally don't see a problem with this, mostly because it seemed like John did want these songs, potentially these songs to be made. And I think like ultimately like Yoko even understood that like these were for Paul, right? And so it's up to Paul
right.
if he wants to do this or not. And I think Paul has, out of all of like the post like death releases, this has more consent than 80% of them, in my opinion, because of that reason. And like I also think too, like how many times have we like through the decades been like, man, I wish I can make this vocal sound cleaner, or like in record archival situations been like, man, I wish that we could like clear up these historical documents and tapes to figure out what's going on. And now we have the technology to do that.
I definitely think you're right about that. And like one thing I want to hit on this is that it feels more respectful because of the context and the intention, right? But at the same time, I think one of the important uses of AI, and one of the distinctions in this case, is that it's AI with a human element. Mm-hmm. It's AI as a tool used to help human creativity and, innately technological problems that were, a huge problem still now, but also back in the day. So I think like that's a huge different context here than being like, oh, I had this AI scan. I had like, imagine this, like going to Prince, right? Imagine if it's like, hey, we got an AI to scan all of Prince's like unreleased records. And like we got all 1,000 songs, and then all the songs that you already know. And the AI is going to start making songs in the style of Prince, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like that would be way more of a place of like disrespectful than this, right? Because it feels like there was an intention. It feels like the human element has remained intact, which is that, hey, John wants you to sing this song with him. And I'm sure even, if John was like here today, like let's say he just magically came from the afterlife down, right? Well, first we'd have to explain a couple things to him. Second, we'd have to be like, hey, John.
What would you explain to John Lennon?
Man, so many things.
Would you explain to him the lore of Yu-Gi-Oh? Because I probably would do that.
There's a guy named Kaibo, right? Anyway, the point is that we'd have to explain John Lennon like everything, right? Imagine John Lennon's here with us, but like basically, one of the things I think John would probably not like have problems with, if I like assumed, is just being like, hey, we have this magic technology that cleans up your vocals now, right? And makes it sound better. And you already recorded this thing. Can we still use it? He'd probably be like, yeah, use the technology to make my voice sound better.
Yeah.
Right. Not necessarily like, hey, John, we're replacing you with a giant machine, right? It's more of like, hey, we're going to take your existing vocals and sweeten them. Now, I wonder, obviously, you kind of get into like a ship of Theseus argument here, which is like, how much do you change before it becomes fundamentally different than what it was? Like if you add a plank of wood to a new ship, how much pieces of wood do you change out before it's a new ship kind of thing? Mm-hmm. In the same way, I wonder if like, it's like you reconstructed John's voice and we made it better or whatever. And it's like, is this still the same? You know what I mean? I would imagine that they would keep a lot of the same human elements there, right? And that is one thing with AI that seems like second nature, but you would be surprised that people a little bit go overboard with, which is like, oh, let's just pitch correct John a little bit. Hey, let's like maybe change this phrase a little bit with this technology we have.
Auto-tune on John Lennon. And make him sing.
Oh my God.
A T-Pain song. That's gotta be so sick. It's gonna happen.
There was somebody on TikTok. If I find it, I will shout it out. But like literally, it's a TikTok, and it's like if the Beatles made music in 2023, and it has like the same kind of intro as DJ Khaled, but it goes the Beatles, and it's just like auto tuned. And I was like, that is the funniest thing I've heard. But the point is like, yeah, like I think definitely the way they handle this is very important, as well as just the objective of the technology, right? Mm-hmm. Like they are using this in a restorative fashion. They seem to want to keep John's vision intact. And then Paul, who is historically his only big co-writer, you know what I mean? I'm sure, I know John's written with other people, but like, the most notable person that people would expect, like knows everything about John Lennon, Paul, is the other person writing the other half of the song. Like this is the most almost respectful we have gotten with AI yet, right?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to hit on like this technology is such a different thing because I think people are used to. And oh my God, Colin singing the praises of AI. Here we go. You're finally here, baby, after like 4 episodes of me making fun of it. Anyway, the point is like this is a fundamentally different technology from a lot of stuff that we know and love today, which is like, we're used to the idea, and I think especially people who are in the EDM community or in the electronic community are used to the idea of like, oh, let's take vocals out of here and spice it and do all this stuff, right? That's a skill. And it takes usually a lot of work to like cleanly splice out vocals out of like a song. I mean, you can't find the stems a lot.
It takes days,
right? And if you do, a lot of the stems are derived from trying to separate them, and they're not as clean. And if you want to know something interesting, and if you like want to think about this, if you know songs that are like heavily sampled, for instance, like has a crap ton of samples, go find where the samples are in the songs. And where are the samples most of the time? It's where that part is alone. Mm-hmm. And you know why? Because they can't splice out the rest of it, right? Like Daft Punk's a really good example. Like I was listening to Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, right? And I forgot that the thing with Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger is not that. Usually Daft Punk do a thing where it's like, here's a sample from here, here's a sample from here, here's a sample from here, and they like construct it all at once. But Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger is this song, it's called Cola Bottle Baby, and it's from the 70s, and it's literally that song just like sped up with maybe like 2 samples on top of it. And I guarantee you, when they were making that song, they were probably like, we could change this part of it or do something, and they technologically could not. Right? Which is the interesting part about this technology, is to have the aspect of an AI, a machine that you could train to take out and remove things from audio, which is where I kind of predict that some of this AI technology will end up eventually. Is I think a lot of people think all or nothing with AI technology, which I've kind of hit on before. They think, oh, AI will be here and it will write and create and make all new music. And you're like, yeah, but also there's like a middle ground to that.
Yeah.
Like I brought it up before. There's a lot of AI mastering that exists, for instance, and the mixing process after you send it to get it mastered, and so it's all level and everything. That a lot of that is automated now.
Which
another
arguably is a good thing, right? Like
I think it gives more tools and accessibility where you don't have to find an expert necessarily, and you could submit a master at 3 a.m. and get one back at 3:30. You know what I mean? But that's like the beauty of AI, and that's what I'm saying is like I think people forget, and rightfully so in some ways. I think people think AI, we should worry about it because it's a human substitute for different parts of the thing. And I go, well, also AI can be just a tool, not a human substitute, right? In addition to human creativity, it can aid and, help. I almost said aid and abet like it's a crime. It can aid and abet human creativity. But like, yeah, I think this is like one of the more interesting cases, kind of the same way the Grimes situation is, where Grimes is more about like the legality of it and how to almost push forward with AI in terms of a legal, like money sense. And this is more of what I feel like is a more realistic use of AI that feels respectful to the human craft, let's say, right? Because it's literally just aiding Paul McCartney to write with his friend who's, been dead for 43 years, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is kind of amazing at the end of the day, like for me to even be able to say that sentence. But I think that obviously this is a very cherry-picked example at the same time. I mean, the Beatles are very well known. The story of like John and Paul is very well known. The story of John's tragic death is very well known. I think there are other more small time and more intricate examples that could use AI as technology and not as a human replacement that we haven't even been able to start yet because of the hubbubaloo around AI being like, oh, we could replace all of humanity with music with AI. And I'd be like, nah, why don't we do a little bit of both? Because at the end of the day, the AI has not got to replace human touch yet, in my opinion. And I think, Joe, you would agree with that as well.
Yes, I would 100% agree. I'd also, fully transparently, we use some of these AI tools to help produce our podcast, Oh,
absolutely.
So it's
it's like one of my favorite things Joe's explored.
Yeah, it's like, it's really fun to kind of, like, we kind of both, me and Colin, use this podcast as kind of like a testing ground for like a lot of this new technology, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to use it for our other projects. And I have to say, like, some of the tools that we have been able to use have been pretty incredible. And like, it's shown me that, like, personally, that this is very much, it's a lot different than the hype around NFTs and, like Bitcoin, I feel like, because it's like, this is something more tangible that like people are getting something in return, like of not physical value,
like we
but like
the wheel.
No, it's hard to say that, because like I do feel like we've hit a new threshold in human invention, but I don't know if it's. I don't know. Like, I don't think we will know until like 10 years down the line. But it does, I mean, all things are pointing to it's happening. Now is the time.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll have like the Beatles album Me and you will have to find Sarah Connor. These are all the things that are possible in the AI world.
It's true. It is all possible. I do think that, it's a tool at the end of the day, and tools can be used for good and tools can also be used for evil, right? And I think that I feel like most people are going to side more with like human creativity, but I also do think like the availability of like adding like sprinkling AI throughout these like creative endeavors is going to be really, really interesting to see and experience in our lifetimes. And I mean, it truly could solve so many issues with just like so many problems that we have in the world. Just like, I think the biggest thing is managing data, right? I think that's like, it's going to be so harshly utilized there. I think where it gets murky is when you start hooking it up to military systems, perhaps. But
Sure, that's not in our domain.
We'll see if Skynet. Yeah, all hail Skynet Records. That's
a different podcast that's going to have to deal with Skynet, and we'll have to deal with Skynet Records.
It's very true.
Very true. Joe, tell me about what you've been reading up on.
Yeah, so breaking news, everybody. Breaking news.
We're anti-alcohol? Sorry, I'm going to hit that into the ground.
No, that. But also, my windshield wiper fluids are low, and I have to replace them. But
did it just show that in the car? Please tell me you were like in the middle of talking, you were like, this is kind of dirty.
No, I definitely looked, and I looked down, and it was like windshield wiper fluids needed. And I was like, great. But no, the real story that we were talking about today is that
Joe needs an oil change. Anyway, keep going.
Is that black-owned record stores are in trouble, essentially. And what I mean by that is that they've actually been in pretty harsh decline as of recently. And what's really interesting about that is the fact that records have come back so much when it comes to like selling physical media in music. So this is an article written by Billboard where they follow a man named Tabango Benito. I might have butchered that, so sorry. But Benito started his first brick and mortar record store in Atlanta in 1996. And at the time, he says, quote, there were about 400 to 500 black-owned record stores around the country, and there were a lot of conferences. When I came in, senior store owners took me under their wing and showed me how the business operated. Benito's still in physical retail, according to Billboard, 27 years later, running DBS Sounds, but the pool of black-owned record stores has been decimated, essentially, falling to around 70, according to his count. So there's like about 18 to 2,100 independent record stores in the U.S., which means that black-owned outlets now represent just a tiny, tiny portion of that. And what basically the Billboard states is that the biggest thing impacting the situation is honestly systemic gaps when it comes to black businesses in general. It's not just record stores, right? It's a lot of different situations. The biggest one, some of the hurdles, quote, some of the hurdles facing black record stores are systemic, such as the racial wealth gap, gentrification, bias in the loan application process, which I would actually argue is probably the biggest one right now. And what's unfortunate now is like getting a business loan, I feel like today is almost 30 times harder than it was, like, I would even argue like 5 years ago, just because the amount of inflation that we've experienced. And also when you're trying to get a business loan in the music industry, a lot of banks are not down for it. right? You kind of need angel investors in a lot of this stuff, and it's really, really difficult. But in 2001, he joined with more than 20 other Black-owned stores to create the FAMS Coalition, which is Forever a Music Store. And they are intent on gaining more support from the music industry. And they are basically trying to get financial assistance as well as advocating for Black-owned record stores to get exclusive records. And for example, the biggest one that helped these stores was actually the new Beyonce record, which, Colin, did you hear about this at all? Like with the record release of of Renaissance in October?
No, I did not hear about it. Tell me about it.
What's interesting, I didn't hear about it either, but I feel like it's such an important part of the story for this record. Basically, Beyonce's team sent the record early to a bunch of Black-owned record stores and allowed them to sell the record a week before the official launch date of the record. So,
that's interesting.
yeah, it was huge. It was like sent out through the coalition, and it basically had at the time there's 26 stores, now it's at 22, but they sold more than 1,000 copies of Renaissance combined, and according to Marquita Rodriguez, quote, "That was huge for us." So like these businesses are very much trying to soak in as much of this money as they can. Like these vinyl sales are so essential for their survival, essentially. A lot of people might consider 1,000 records to not be a lot, but when you do the math and you're like, oh, this is Beyonce Renaissance, some of these record stores might have been selling the record for like $70 to $100. Some of them probably had box sets that had a bunch of like $300 worth of merch and stuff that you could sell as well. And so this type of release really kind of sparked this idea within the coalition. And since then, they've been trying to kind of like approach record labels and artist teams and being like, hey, you should release this way. You should give us the ability to sell your record a week before it's released. It gains a bunch of hype during that time. It helps us out. It helps you out. And there you go. Another interesting situation when it comes to kind of the music that they are selling, the problems that a lot of these Black businesses are running into is that when it comes to like R&B and hip hop, there's a lot of records that just aren't pressed for vinyl, especially in the rap genre. And the reason that is because it's basically, I don't know, it's like the genre of rap is very much online based, and they market heavily online. And so they don't have a lot of physical items. And a lot of times they don't even have a lot of merch. And so when they're trying to build up hype, they're mostly using their money from streaming royalties and appearances in order to kind of funnel into like music videos and online content and that kind of thing. But what's interesting about that, at least from my perspective, is that a lot of rap shows, and we've even covered this on the podcast, are struggling to get hard ticket sales and have struggled for like a long time, like really since like I want to argue like the 90s, where like rap was like really, really taken off into the forefront, right? Like 80s, 90s. Yeah. And like especially in the live music realm, because that's how you got to experience that music. And now since like things have changed and like things have moved online, a lot of these artists are just really embracing that format, but they're kind of neglecting like a prime target audience that they could be making money from, because as Billboard points out, a high percentage of people who buy records don't even own a record player. They just want to support their artists.
We talked about that.
So
literally
it's
50%.
Yeah, so it's kind of insane that a lot of these records are not like or like these albums are not getting pressed by these creators, and Billboard even points out like artists such as like Tyler the Creator and Kendrick Lamar have sold insane amounts of vinyl, more than 500,000 physical units a piece last year, according to Luminate. And many major rappers still don't release actual LPs. So, like, for example, in 2022, had no physical component, including a pair of Drake releases, Lil Durk's 7,220, and Polo G's Hall of Fame. Drake is not making vinyl?
That is
what?
Very strange to hear.
Dude, if Drake made vinyl, he would be another billionaire. I don't know, trillionaire at this point. Like, it's kind of wild that they're not like fully utilizing this space, because people will buy it. I mean, like Kendrick and Tyler both proved that people are willing to pay for this.
It's interesting because, like, if you look up by genre, for instance, what sells the most volume for vinyl, and we can get into this too, is that 51% of it is rock music, right? And the second most is R&B and hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at around 17%, and that's from 2021 numbers, right? So it's not like there isn't a market, but there is one thing you did point out to me that I haven't really thought about. It's like a lot of people that buy vinyl for rap and like hip hop, it's like historical vinyl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like
I don't
it's
like
an
or
old
it's like
artist. It's like Wu-Tang.
Or it's weirdly obscure artists. Like more obscure than like Drake. Like I'd be like, oh, an MF Doom on vinyl? You know what I mean? Like, okay. But then, like, I don't hear, like, a lot of being like, oh, yeah, let's get Drake on vinyl. But, like, hitting that first number, that was honestly one of the things that I thought about, like, first when we were talking about black-owned businesses struggling. It's just sadly, you know, the market with it is extremely whitewashed, just because 51% of it is rock music. 51% of it is rock music, which is didn't start out this way, but is now historically a whitewashed genre. You know what I mean?
But what's so crazy about that, Colin, is like it's been proven that like rock indie music right now even is not selling well. It's not doing as well as it was like in the early 2000s, or even during the vinyl resurgence of like the 2010s. And so when we're getting into like modern music and pop music, it's crazy to see like pop records like Adele being on shelves, but then not having a Drake record on shelves.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
because
absolutely.
It's like Drake is the biggest rap artist ever right now.
I mean, we talked about it on the show, Drake was the artist of Spotify of the 2010s.
Yeah.
He got more streams than any other artist in the world. By far, like by a significant margin too. And so like it is weird to be like, why isn't Drake like a vinyl king? You know what I mean? Why I could totally see some people being like, hey, let me buy Drake on vinyl. I'm a really big fan. But I will say the thing with vinyl is that at the same time, it kind of reminds me of video game sales in a lot of way. Vinyl goes after whales.
Yeah.
A lot. And what I mean by whales is like to spend, you know, my vinyl budget is $500 every 2 months.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And they will cater to those kind of people.
Well, and those people are the people you want, because you'd rather have a small group of people paying a lot than a large number of people paying very little in some cases. Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing is like, if you can keep curtailing to this, and I think vinyl struggles with some things too, which is that like, vinyl has this kind of like thing that I personally disagree with. It's just different sounding. It's not superior sounding. But there is this like predicate that it is, And to be honest, a lot of that community, and you can see it in the rock numbers here, are going to these albums that are supposed to be like mythically hi-fi albums, right? And what's weirder is like, what I find is it's like even rock albums that are like sold today, or like blues albums that like are not, they're just regular recordings, right? They're not like Steely Dan, level recordings where there's some like hi-fi. People will just assume because they're in that genre and they're on vinyl that this is the way to listen to it, right?
Yeah.
And they will buy the vinyl because of that. I don't really see that a lot with R&B and hip hop, which sucks because like, I mean, to be honest, like if you want to get in there, I'm going to piss some people off here. If you want to get in the real nitty gritty here, you can get really, really, really clean samples from things digitally, way cleaner than recording a guitar. It sounds way cleaner if you're using a nice digital sample that's been sampled very well, right? That's more hi-fi half the time. So I think it's interesting that has not translated to the R&B and hip-hop genre because to be honest, in some ways, it's a more hi-fi genre.
Yeah, and also it's just like I feel like it even kind of would cycle into itself of hip hop being such a huge mecca for producers as well as like when it comes to like chopping and sampling things. Like it's such like historically DJs and producers, hip hop producers have like taken these records and like chopped them up, and they're vinyl records that they use on digitally distributed albums that it's like you could just cycle it back in, right? And like,
and honestly, I'm seeing a little bit of it, but honestly, I'm gonna get more heat for this. I like a good EDM.
You like a good EDM on a Sunday night?
I like a good EDM. Yeah, right? I like it if it's well mixed in digital stuff. But for me, if you're spinning vinyl and you're fucking chopping vinyl live, holy
that shit's tight.
That is so cool. And so I've seen a little bit of a resurgence with it, like Boiler Room style and everything, where people have been chopping vinyl again more live. But honestly, I hope it continues because that would maybe be a boost to a lot of these like black-owned businesses, especially who have a lot of the forethought and community to go, oh, you want really good samples? Here's this obscure Commodores record. You know what I mean? Like, who have the actual like insight compared to just like all these like white indie dudes that are like, do you want Pine Grove 3? But like, I mean, no shit against Pine Grove, but just saying, like, I feel like that's another way that's marketable. And then lastly, like I said, like rock is 51% of the genre. Like, be real with y'all. I mean, these might just be, if rock's 51% of the genre, it's a historically white genre. This literally might be, I'm not even going to say might. This has systematic racism vibes. Like, this has people who are like, oh, I want to go to my vinyl shop or whatever, but they don't want to go to a vinyl shop that appears to be, quote unquote, too black or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or has different music. Or
has a different focus than their like regular rock community.
Yeah.
And like, I'm sure, these stores are fucking great. You know what I mean? They're well curated. They're well put together. They know their shit, but they'll just see, people that don't look like them who walk in the store and they'll be like, nah, I'm not going to shop there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's honestly probably one of the worst parts of this whole thing is in the world we live in, you cannot rule out the systematic racism that is a part of this. So I think, I'm hoping there will be an uptick, especially for it, because I do think the vinyl community, in my opinion, is very whitewashed right now. I think I see some ways that we could see diversification. I'm very glad that these, shops are banding together, and it seems that artists are like Beyonce are actually trying to support them in a very clinical and also easy bonus way to give to these communities, like to be like, hey, I'm going to give you this now a week early, right? That's a palpable perk of shopping at this store, right? Is that like, if I was a big vinyl head and I wanted, vinyl the day it came out or something like that, I might be like, after I got Beyonce's thing, I'd be like, I should stick around here. I should follow them on social media. Maybe they're going to have another thing like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how you sell and keep in people's minds, because to be honest, like, especially with vinyl, there's a lot of big box stores where people just order vinyl or they order it from the website of something like that. But the communal aspect of these record stores is still very important at the end of the day. And I think there is a market for it now where we almost see this counter revolution of wanting the old timey experience of vinyl itself, but also the community around vinyl. And there's nothing more communal about a vinyl experience than being at the record store and talking to other people and being like, hey, what are you listening to? You know, hey, what do you recommend around the counter? You know what I mean? What have people been buying? That kind of stuff. And so like, that's why it's important to do that. And especially to support people, you know, of every race, creed, and color, because that creates diversity in the vinyl community.
100%. Yeah, I think people live. I think a lot of people, especially vinyl heads, live in a state of fear when it comes to new things. And I really, if you're a vinyl person,
ooh, an MP3. Ooh.
Oh God, a FLAC file. No, I think if you're a vinyl head, try to support a Black-owned vinyl shop if there's one in your town. Unfortunately, there's like 3 cities that this place named for places that don't have that, and Nashville is one of them, which is like literally so disappointing. I was gonna
say, I don't think I could name one.
Yeah, it's like, it's so horrible because like it would do. I think it would do great. I think if it hit the right market in Nashville, it would really soar. But that is the biggest thing. And, you know, there's another thing that, you know, this article didn't mention of like potential issues that business owners are running into when they're starting their business up. And I think one of the biggest one, honestly, is land. I think securing land is so difficult for vinyl shops, like, because otherwise you have to take over a vinyl shop that was already a vinyl shop, or you're revitalizing a house, or something to that extent. But then, you know, Colin, I don't know if you've had any problems like this, but I mean, every time I'm going to a record store in Nashville or Tennessee in general, it's always like kind of in the outskirts of like the it spots, right? You have to like really track them down. And it's so difficult to just have accessible record stores.
The worst part about records, it's weirdly cyclical, is that you need space to store them.
Yeah,
you know,
they're
big things. They add up very fast in space. I only have I maybe have like 70, 80, and I feel like I'm like, what am I gonna do with all these? Like, I gotta place them right, and it's a lot of space, and to keep them organized too, you need more space. So
yeah, especially
in like a city environment where, you know, the rates for a mortgage or any kind of business loan are so high right now and everything, it's not worth it for a lot of them to try to get this land in an inner part, you know what I mean, of the city that would be very high traffic. But that's kind of what you need for vinyl a lot of the time, or you need incredibly good advertising. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I do feel for them. I hope that, you know, some of these artists can come together and help them. And I hope this coalition kind of brings to light more about the need for these record stores to be around, be a part of the community, and expose culture to different people of all reads, races, and color.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? From their background, from whoever's background, you know, that's the point of these places, is to be a beacon of hope for a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm not represented in these other places. Like, I am not. Like, there's nothing even related to whatever I've listened to in my life here at this record store. But in some of these places, it could be like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's culture at the end of the day. That's what his music is. It's culture.
Yeah, the 3 cities, Birmingham, Nashville, and Charlotte, which unfortunately is not surprising.
Yeah, right.
Being that they're all in the South. But, yeah, it's tough. But, yeah, don't shop at Amoeba. There's so many other places. Do other things. Be your own person. All right, and, Colin. Our favorite time of week. What have you been listening to?
Well, in the world of honestly, there's arguments about album artwork and you're going to have to follow me because it will lead me to my pick that I've been listening to because it's been stuck in my head. There's been calls for the last 20 years that album artwork has been getting thrown down the hill because we've gone away from physical media. It's just a small picture, all that kind of stuff. It's gotten worse and worse in a lot of ways. And I know when it started to get worse, and it's Creed's Weathered. That is one of the worst album pictures I've ever seen in my life. Basically, it's like if in my basic Photoshop class, they told me to make an album cover for Creed and I did it ironically. But it's 2001.
It's so
They're
bad.
not doing it ironic. They're not doing it ironically.
Can I explain what's on here?
Sure, tell them what it is.
So the thing is, there's a lot happening. First off, it's my favorite thing about early 2000s graphic design is that everything
it's
looks
always
gross.
Orange.
Yeah,
it's always orange and brown.
It's textured. It's overly textured, sharp, gross, grungy, disgusting. So it's
2001. Grunge is over.
Yeah, it's like orange and gray. That's the color palette we're dealing with a little bit of red because the moon behind this tree.
The blood moon from Zelda is in the background.
Background. There's a man chiseling their faces into a tree, but it looks so hideous and clip arty that it's insane.
You know those iPhone apps that are fuse two pictures? Somebody took a very sharp textured tree and then fused 3 pictures of Creed together into the tree.
And then
that is what it looks
badly color edited everything together. But yeah, it looks like they're on a very rocky terrain with 2 trees. There's a tree in the distance and a man chopping the tree down. Wow, the blood moon spills rays of light.
I don't know. Maybe it could be a deep observation of hurting yourself or cutting yourself, and then you remember it's Creed, so it's not that. But the point is that I really think it's the funniest song I've heard. It was getting big on TikTok, and I hadn't heard this Creed song, and it's called "One Last Breath," and I think it's the funniest song because it's just all these songs at this point in the early 2000s are so overdramatic that it's funny. It's they're saying this feels like if Creed made Phantom of the Opera. That's what this song feels
yeah, dude.
Where it has the same melodramaticism as Phantom of the Opera, where it's I've seen you for 3 seconds, I'm in love with you, and now it's hold me now, I'm 6 feet underground, and you're what are you talking about? Anyway, it's so bad, it's good. I enjoy it. Just the whole album artwork really sells it. And again, I've talked about it on the show. People keep trying to do it. Stop trying to make these bands unironically be but they're actually good though. You can enjoy things. That's fine. They're not good. Same thing with Nickelback. They're not good.
Yeah.
They're funny. They're fun. They're not good. Anyway, thank you for entering Colin's hate period of the podcast. I've had 4 hot takes in it. Joe, what have you been listening to while I've been 6 feet underground?
Your mic clipped so hard.
I'm going to leave it.